Good evening, everybody. Welcome back for another edition of Reasonable Doubt. I'm your host, Jimmy Ardwan, along with my good friend Julio Vela. And Julio, our guest tonight.
I am so pumped.
I know.
State Representative, Mr. Gene Wu.
From the 137th District here in Texas. How are you, Gene?
Good. How are you?
We are great. Glad to have you on.
Thank you.
It's something a little show like ours can get a state rep on in the week of the election.
I'm pumped about it, man. First and foremost, congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you. As long as you talk about anything but the election.
Well, I mean, it is a bit interesting, and we'll be with Gene. Gene is our guest tonight for the next hour. We'll be taking your phone calls around 8:30 if you want to get in our conversation. 713-807-1794 is the number. We also have Twitter up at HCCLA_TV, so please participate. We'd love to get your questions and comments in. We got a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. Gene's got a whole list of things that the guys up in Austin are working on. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And there's a lot of interesting things. I mean, we've kind of talked ad nauseum about the whole election and the lead up and everything, and I think everybody knows. We had a clean sweep pretty much in the courthouse by the Democrats. So there changes be a coming, as they say, around here. And it just generally, I mean, I don't want to get into too many of the specifics, because we can get, obviously, the people, I think, hopefully, we'll get the people that are going to be coming into office and onto the bench to come on and actually talk about what they're going to do now that they're elected. But, I mean, it is interesting because, Gene, you obviously are one of the champions up in Austin for criminal justice reform. And I hope, we had Kim on the show. She's now going to be our DA, and she is very adamant that she's going to continue to implement a lot of the criminal justice reforms that have been started, and carry that on and add some new reforms in. And, so I'm optimistic. I don't know what to expect, frankly, from some of the new judges that are coming in. I'm upset about some of the judges we lost,
right,
because we lost some very good Republican judges, right, who I think were young, who were really just, a lot of them were first-term judges who were really just starting to come into their own as judges.
Right.
Not only were they good prosecutors, some of them who were both prosecutors and defense lawyers, they were just good people. And I think that sometimes that more than anything in a judicial position is the most important thing, because your job is to judge others, and I don't know. I mean, Gene, you were around the courthouse. You were a prosecutor. Yeah. I hate the fact that straight ticket voting, right, can take away so many good people on both sides.
So this is, I like to ask this question after every cycle like this is go. You guys tired of voting for judges yet?
Yeah.
So this happened in 2008. Obama right. came in. There was a sweep. 2 years later, there was a reaction to 2008, and there was a Republican sweep. Judges from both sides, very experienced, hundreds of years of experience just thrown away on both sides. And each time we those of us in the courthouse who work here and who have to deal with people here, we ask, why are we doing this again? Mm-hmm. Like, what is the purpose of this? How is this improve our democracy? Yeah. And I'm not sure there's a good answer to this. And I'll tell you this. When I go talk to...
Is that something that the legislature can
Oh, yes. This is, in fact, this is a very thing that there's one member who carries this bill every single session, has carried it almost every single session for, I think, probably 20 years now. And the bill basically says, hey, let's stop electing judges. Or at the minimum, let's take them off of partisan ballots. Let's put them on just regular elections. So most people, if you just vote straight ticket, you have to go down and find them and then actually have to vote for them. So most people just leave it alone. And in the end, judges and people who actually know things would end up electing them. I'll tell you this, I talk to attorneys from other states. We tell them that we elect our judges and they're floored. We tell them, no, not only do we elect our judges are partisan, and they're like, they don't know what to say. And say, wait, it gets even better. Not only do we elect them, and they're partisan, but they can take money from parties in front of them. And then now they're having spasms on the floor.
Yeah, that's the aspect of it that I don't like, is that, and one of the things that we've talked about on this program is the fact, I really don't even like the DA's office being a political partisan thing,
Right.
but I don't think you're going to be able to get around that. But it is problematic to me that judges who are judging the credibility of witnesses, particularly in the criminal courthouse where a lot of those witnesses are police officers, are able to take money and endorsements from police officers.
Exactly.
That's a real problem for me.
And take money from defense attorneys and take money from law firms and take money from whatever it is.
Yeah.
And even if you say, look, these people are professionals, they're unbiased, they're trained to do this. Even if a case comes down to it's like it's weighed pretty evenly on both sides, and what is somebody's made a motion, do you do it or do you not do it, and it's pretty evenly weighted. What if it just affects it just a tiny part of a hair's width of weight to tip it one side? Is that fair?
No.
No, it's not. I think it's absolutely absurd that we elect our judges. I think it's absolutely absurd that we make them run on a partisan ticket. I mean, the very nature of having a partisan ticket defies the rules of the judicial conduct, the ethical code of judicial conduct. Judges are supposed to say we have not made up our minds about anything, but parties themselves have platforms. If you're a part of that platform, aren't you automatically subscribing to that? To their predisposed views?
You would think so.
Some of the scariest things, at least in my mind, that we are facing, at least with the judiciary post this election are, how am I supposed to go, let's say, without an agreed recommendation, in other words, to a judge, and some of them who have been elected in the criminal courts this year have never tried a criminal case. How am I supposed to go in front of a judge, and maybe the guy's charged with murder, serious aggravated sexual assault, or even a capital murder, to a judge who has never even tried a criminal case? And now this judge is supposed to be signing death warrants?
Right.
It is one of the most scariest things that at least I'm confronted with that's coming up. Gene, State Rep Gene, Mr. Wu, you talked about Gene. You talked about the backlash that happened. Do you think that in 2 years, when the county court at law judges and/or the remaining district court judges in 2 years, when they come up for election, that there might be a real possibility that the Democrats are going to sweep at that point again?
No, and I think that is a real possibility. The reaction in 2010 was to Obama being elected. The reaction in 2018 may be to Donald Trump being elected, and we'll see what happens. And you know what? We have a legislative session coming up right now. If we're interested in stopping electing our judges, maybe go contact your state rep and your state senator and tell them, hey, electing state judges, really bad idea. Let's stop it now before.
But what is the alternative to that? I mean, so we stop electing the judges. I mean, obviously, people who are not lawyers and who are they're not in the courthouse every day. They want to know, well, what was that? How what did that look like? I mean, I don't really.
What the rest of the country does. We do what the entire rest of the country does, which is some kind of combination of judicial appointments, qualifications board, and then you have retention elections, or you have a judicial board that oversees them, or you have term limits on judges, whatever it is. There's a million combinations of possibilities outside of let's put them on partisan tickets and put them to the ballot. Do
they have, does this type of initiative have support in the legislature, or is it something? No.
There's always scoundrels like me who like these things and actually care about the way our system works. And there's a lot of lawyers in the legislature, but there's not a lot of trial lawyers. There's maybe like 15, 20 of us who actually have to be in front of judges and actually worry about how they weigh things. Mm-hmm. A lot of the other attorneys are transactional attorneys. And they don't ever step into a courtroom. The problem is the parties, both sides of the parties really like this. And here's the thing: judges run county-wide, right? Especially in the Harris County and Dallas County, Tarrant, Travis. you can't spend money knocking on doors. You can't spend money mailing all that many people. It's just not effective, and you don't have enough money to do it, or it's just not going to work. So what do? You give your money to the party.
Yeah.
To do county-wide stuff, and the counties really like this. Imagine that you have all these judges who are raising tons of money and just handing it over to you.
Well, I saw at least on NPR, it's not NPR, but 88.7, where during the election, I didn't hear much from the Democrats, but I would hear Republican advertisements saying, vote straight party ticket.
Democrats do the same.
And I'd imagine that it's the same thing on the other side.
Both sides know exactly how this works and exactly how it plays out. When I went and worked and got people out to vote, some of it was for me, myself, to make sure that I was safe. But I'm in my district is like 60. We won by like 67 points, percentage points. The rest of my job was to make sure that our Democratic county-wides got elected as well. So we made sure that our straight Democratic voters went out and voted, and we made sure. We worked to make sure that happened. Does that keep playing into the system? Yeah, of course. But that's the game. You have to play the game that's there.
Yeah, you do. I mean, it's a game. It's going to continue to go on. It doesn't sound like there's much support in the legislature to really change it, and so I think we're going to be right back here in 2018 doing the same thing. Gene, one of the things that we saw this week was on a national level, Massachusetts became another state that legalized marijuana. They had a referendum, and they are, and theirs is a little interesting because so now we have Colorado, we have Washington, we have Alaska,
California, Nevada.
Yeah, we've got a ton of states now that have legalized marijuana. Recreational marijuana to some extent. The Massachusetts one allows you to carry up to an ounce on you.
Which is a lot.
And it gets even better because I say that tongue in cheek, getting better, but they also allow you to keep up to 10 ounces in your house.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good party.
That's a really good
party. What are you going to do with 10 ounces?
We've had various people on this show, various lawyers who have come in and say, it will be the fifth of never, hell will freeze over before Texas ever legalizes marijuana. Yeah. And I know you're working hard to decriminalize some of the lower level stuff. Talk about that, and also talk about, give me your thoughts on, are we ever going to see a legalization similar to what we see in other states?
I don't see it as an impossibility. I see it as just being very difficult and at the wrong time. So here's something that you keep in mind. Texas is run by the Republicans, period, full stop, right?
I know some Republicans who like to smoke weed.
Well, are they in the legislature?
I don't know.
So
that's the problem. But I know some who like to smoke dope.
Let's start with that. Let's start with number one. The state is controlled by Republicans and will be for the foreseeable future and probably for the foreseeable decade.
Yeah.
Okay.
This whole notion of turning Texas into a battleground state.
Well, it's.
I love it.
It's getting
evil decade. I love it.
It will be there, and it will be there. It will be there eventually, but it will be slow.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be the overnight thing everyone talks about. So here's the thing. Number one, Republicans need to win primaries. Okay, and most of our districts are fairly gerrymandered to, my district is a heavily Democratic district. Most other Republicans are in a heavily Republican district. Their main answer is not in a general election. Their answer is in the primaries. So they have to answer, essentially, I want to oversimplify it a little bit. And this is, and again, I'm not a Republican, but this is from my understanding and my observation of what occurs. There's essentially like two groups. One is, let's say, I want to call, and they hate this term, the country club Republicans, who they're about business, they're a little bit on moral issues, but they're really about business, and they're slightly conservative mostly. And then you have like sort of like the Tea Party, ultra conservatives. They're more libertarian than anything else. They're very, very much for marijuana reform and all this other stuff. They want to legalize everything. They don't really care, and we have plenty of those. And there's maybe even a third group of like the purely social conservatives, where their only concern is about more like social sin issues, right?
Keeping transgenders out of bathrooms.
Bathrooms, drug use, prostitution, et cetera, et cetera. You can imagine the things that people who are, are pearl clutchers
Yeah.
thinking about,
Yeah.
right? So you have if you have a member from a district who is very strongly libertarian and has a very, very Tea Party bent, there's tons of members in the legislature, Republicans, who are like, yeah, we'll sign it. We're for marijuana reform. But you have to remember that may be for a state rep district, that's fine. But if you have a senator who has to cobble together a coalition of different Republicans, of country club Republicans, the social conservatives, and the Tea Party people, they have to sort of like make everyone happy, right? And there's still a lot of the moral, the social conservatives and the country club Republicans are still on the very much of, oh, marijuana is a gateway drug and it'll destroy the world.
It's the Valium in their medicine cabinets that's destroying this country.
Right.
90% of these wackos who use the gateway excuse,
Right.
they smoke dope in college or high school.
And here's the thing.
Frustrates me.
We build policy upon what we know. So if you don't think you know people who smoke marijuana, and you don't have to interact with it on a daily basis, it's not a problem to you. Therefore, you can legislate the hell out of it, and nobody bats an eye. You know what they do see? They see people on painkillers.
Yeah.
They see people on heroin because that's now affecting their community. So,
and that's the thing that bothers me most is they're all up in arms about marijuana until their kid gets popped for it,
but their kid doesn't get popped for it.
Well,
That's another issue.
yeah,
a different issue.
But then they do, cry about it when their kid gets arrested for it or something like that. But the prescription drug abuse in this country is off the charts.
So
that's the gateway drug.
No, absolutely. Let me just finish this point. Back in 2015, we passed what's called the Compassionate Use Act, which allowed you to use cannabinoid oils, like virtually no THC in it. It's just purely the oils from marijuana. There's no THC. You can't get high because you're giving it to kids.
Yeah.
You're giving it to kids with epileptic seizures.
Right.
And it's been shown that it has great effect. The legislature passed it overwhelmingly. Almost nobody voted against it. The governor reluctantly signed it, but when he signed it, he says, "Well, this will be the last marijuana bill I sign." That was his statement at the signing. And you're like, "Well, this is not really a marijuana bill. Okay, this is really about medical use, and this is a byproduct from a plant that can be used to treat neurological disease." But it was treated as the marijuana bill.
Why would he say something like that? This is the last marijuana bill I'm going to sign.
Because you don't have to forget, the governor has to win a primary.
Yeah.
And he has to win a primary where it's hard for him to go back to explain to his primary voters, to the country club Republicans and to the social conservatives, why he voted for a bill decriminalizing or even dealing with marijuana at all in any sense of the word. If someone challenged them, they could say, "Well, you're obviously a liberal because you're with the hippies and you did something with marijuana."
Or he'll have the other faction of the Republican Party calling him a fake Republican.
Right. And look, this is not a theory.
Yeah.
You could look at the primaries that happened in this last cycle. Look at the primaries that happened and the Republicans that got challenged. They got the ones who passed marijuana bills or signed on to marijuana bills got beaten over the head with them.
So let me. What says Eugene? Marijuana. Where do we go from here?
So I have a bill that I passed, that I introduced last time, and that I will introduce again this time, which basically takes marijuana, leaves our current penalty ladder for marijuana in place, but takes Class B, which is the lowest, and hacks off the bottom portion of it. So anything below 10 grams, or we have to write it in the legislature, 0.35 ounces, because everything's in ounces for some reason. Well, marijuana's in ounces, but all the other drugs are in grams.
Yeah.
So anything below 10 grams, it's actually like 0.993, something like that, and drop it down to a C. That still allows officers to arrest if they want to, but also allows officers to just hand the ticket, not have to take someone to jail, not have to have someone spend a night in jail and have them bailed out and all this other stuff. But it also gives them the ability to search if they wanted to search, because they're like, I'm going to arrest you and then search you, and if I don't find anything, then I'll just cut you a ticket, right? The law enforcement likes it. Last session, we had 2 or 3 law enforcement groups sign on and say, we like this. It was the only bill with law enforcement support. There were several other bills that did complete legalization, partial legalization, and whatever else.
How do you figure out the the under 10 grams? How is a cop going to figure that out in the field?
The same way they figure it out now. I mean, like, and that's a question that was asked: is like, well, how's an officer supposed to know what's Class C, what's not?
Right.
Well, if you think it's more than 10 grams, you arrest them, take them in, you weigh it, and goes, oops, it's 8 grams. Well, you can still arrest them.
Yeah.
You've already arrested them. You can either keep them in cuffs, but just take them to JP court instead of the downtown jail, or you can say, hey buddy, sorry, here's your ticket, go on your way.
Do you think did this bill have support?
Yeah, it did. We actually got support from law enforcement groups. We only had, so all the other bills, law enforcement all testified like 100% against them, against the other bills. Our bill was only one that only had one law enforcement group testify against it. And even their opposition was like, well, we're not thrilled about it, but.
Do you see this kind of support coming from the larger metropolitan areas, or are you thinking you're seeing support from this from just different areas of the state?
There's not a specific thing. So the Texas Troopers Association supported it, and they're very conservative. But the Texas Sheriff's Association opposed it, which they were the only ones that opposed it, and even their opposition was like, people like it because it's a sensible solution, and really, it will clear out a lot of our jails. I mean, like
Right.
we finally got numbers from the DA's office. 2014, there were like 9,970 misdemeanor marijuana charge cases.
Wow.
Okay, 2015, there was something like 10,016 or something like that, right? So we're talking about that's 10,000 cases, 10,000 people who went to jail, who had to be processed, who took up officer time, who you have to write a long report on that,
Right.
who and all this other stuff. And it's like, well, look. When you're talking about Harris County Jail, you're talking about $1,200 to process a person in, process them out, and that's not even including the time they spent in jail and how much it costs per day in jail. $1,200 on the low level times 10,000 a year. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
How about we spend that on mental health? How about we spend that on I don't know, anything else?
When do you expect to have that bill presented for a vote?
We'll have it. It'll be one of the bills we will pre-file, which pre-filing starts next week.
You say we. What do you mean by that?
My office.
Oh, okay.
I mean, like it's a collective effort.
Right.
So when I say we, I mean like me and my staff.
And so it's a bill that's coming right here from out of your district. Is that right?
Out of me, yeah.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. Do you think are you finding some resistance or support from across the ways on the Republican side? I mean,
not so much. It's I'll say this: when you work a bill, that means you're taking your bill and you're walking it on the floor and saying, "Hey, buddy, here's my bill. This is what it does. This is what people like it. This is why some people don't like it. But I think you really should support it because it does this and it'll help you this. Your district has these factors and it'll help your district by doing X, Y, and Z." And then they go, "That's a good bill. I like it. I'll sign on to it. I'll be a joint author. I'll be a co-author. I want in on this." Okay? And so I'll vote for it. I talked to a lot of members, and the reaction is, just to me, I like this. This is a great idea. It makes a lot of sense. I can't publicly support it. Because again, what do the Republicans have to do? They have to survive a primary.
right. So then, okay, so then let's say this bill passes. You also have something on the back end for Class Cs, don't you?
Yep.
What are you thinking there?
So one thing we've been trying to deal with for just ages, ever since I've been in the legislature, is dealing with Class C records. Now, I mean, you guys have worked with Class C records. They're just a complete nightmare. Some places are really good about keeping records. Some places are bad about keeping records. Some places, you can never prove up a judgment, anything like that. And some places like, look, if you had a kid who bounced the check when they were 19, and because they're dumb and they didn't know how to bounce their checkbook, and they bounced the check, guess what? That's a theft conviction.
Yeah.
And when those records, when he's trying to apply for the banking job at age 29, he's going to have a theft on his record. And, you can't, there's no way to explain to the boss, that, oh, that's a bounced check from when I was 17 or 19. You're just gonna get hired, and then you have all these websites that try to blackmail you into paying them to take your name off their list or whatever else. I think that's BS as well.
So just to be clear, your proposal is the deletion of Class C convictions, even.
Yeah. So the bill that I want to propose, and I think will actually get a decent amount of support, is why are we holding on to Class C records at all? Do we really care that you got a speeding ticket 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, or 20 years ago?
Yeah, because the myth that's out there is everybody thinks that stuff drops off your record after 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I
can't
want to
tell
make
you how many
that. I
people
want to
ask
make
that.
that a reality.
Yeah.
Let's
drop it off after 5.
Here's the other thing: is look again. Let's talk about the taxpayer. Every single one of these records, they cost money. We have records from 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Why?
Right.
Who gives a crap whether somebody bounced a check 30 years ago? And why are we paying for it?
It makes no sense.
And especially, not only are we paying for it, but why are we paying for it? But when we actually need to use it, if we actually need to prove up a judgment, we can't ever prove it up. So like I had this, when I was in the DA's office, one time I was in misdemeanor saying like, hey, Chief, I found something that felony missed. This should have been a felony theft because there's 4 convictions on here. And my chief looks at me and says, I'm about to slap you across the room because these are JP convictions.
Yeah.
You will never prove these up.
You'll never be
ever.
able to get the records. We got a phone call coming in. It's a little before 8:30. Want to remind our viewers we're opening up the phone line. 713-807-1794 is the number. Let's get to our first call right here. Hello, welcome to Reasonable Doubt.
Hello, how are you doing?
We're doing great. How about yourself?
Doing wonderful, doing wonderful. First-time viewer.
Oh, well, we're glad you're tuning in.
I just want to say hello to the state representative. Appreciate his service, and also to you guys. Appreciate your show here. I'm learning a lot from it. But I had a question regarding these record removal websites.
Mm-hmm.
I actually operate one, and I heard the state representative speak something about it kind of being a nonsense thing. Can we elaborate or discuss why it's not a good thing to expose these public records for the community?
Well, I don't think that's what he's saying. I don't think it's necessarily exposing public records, and feel free, Gene, to chime in to the caller's question, but I think it's more of at a certain point it becomes
So, I mean,
a little bit ridiculous to continue to maintain this stuff.
To the caller aside, and my apologies to the caller, I think most of these sites are blackmail. Just pure and simple, it's blackmail.
Yeah.
We have people who were never convicted, but had a mugshot taken, and they can't get their names off of it. Even after cases, their records were expunged, or after the records are sealed, those records still appear on these websites. And you can't just go to one website. You have to go all of them and have them removed.
Well, and in there there's a law now that after you get an expunction,
Right.
That
But you have to assume that they're actually going to follow the law.
Right, but
Because you don't ever know who's operating.
Well, here's the thing. Is there a way, I believe now, and I've looked at the law, there seems to be a way to file a civil cause of action if you send the person basically a certified letter with the judgment saying remove this, and they don't do it. After you've got an expunction, then it opens them up to a civil cause of action.
And I think if people who are watching this don't understand, all these records are already publicly available. You can submit a criminal background search on anyone, and the stuff will pop up. You can go to the Harris County District Clerk's website and just search for someone. Their stuff will pop up. the point is, I think what they're doing is they're trying to bring unusual light to people's rather usually minor indiscretions. Like somebody got arrested for DWI when they were 18 and they're now like 46, and they're trying to embarrass them with it so that they'll pay them money to have them removed. Now, if these websites are just putting their records on and nothing else, that's one thing. But to say put them on and says, well, we'll take it off if you give us $300, give us $500.
Well, and I think going to the caller's question also is when they're posting arrests, they're not posting dispositions. And so maybe cases dismissed, maybe cases got a not guilty.
Yeah.
And that individual deserves as a right to have their name cleared, and they can't.
And it never says it was a bounce check. Or it doesn't ever say is a first-degree theft or a first-degree felony theft. It just says theft. So everyone just assumes the worst. They don't provide any details. You know, and we can go. I mean, I can go on for like another 2 hours about this stuff. This makes me mad. This stuff makes me mad because it is. I think it is blackmail.
Well, I want to go back to something you said in talking about the marijuana, the dropping and everything. You talked about the Harris County Jail. Prior to the election, Sheriff Hickman sought a variance to bring more beds into the Harris County Jail so he could put, like, I don't know,
people on cots.
Yeah, on cots.
That's ridiculous.
It is, and I suspect, you know, Julio and I had Ed Gonzalez on this show. 2 weeks prior to the election, 3 weeks prior to the election, Julio? I can't remember, but it was, I mean, right before. You know, based on our conversation with him, I think that variance is going to die on the vine.
Yeah, it should. I hope it does.
Yeah, I think it is. But going back to our discussion.
I've signed a letter opposing it, by the way.
Yeah. Going back to our discussion about the marijuana, and I know we have the First Chance Act here that tries to keep people from going into jail on these things. Is there a way for the legislature to enact a First Chance Act, so to speak? I mean, I realize that you're trying to do this. I mean, is the First Chance Act something that's being talked about as a legislative means to try and, something like that would help reduce the jail population?
We have stuff like 1244A. You know, that's all legislative created. And, you know, we as a legislature can dictate how certain cases are handled. We set the criteria and say, like, if it meets this criteria, then you shall follow this path. We can do that.
Well, it's like offering deferred adjudication. The legislature controls that.
But generally, I mean, personally, I don't like doing that.
Yeah.
That as a legislative body, I think it's bad policy for the legislature to dictate how process flows, because you have to think it may be good for this, but you have to think this is a double-edged sword. That by doing this, you're also closing the door to other possibilities.
True. That
if you say we're going to do this way and only this way, that closes off all of the other avenues. And sometimes that may be good. Sometimes that may be bad. And what I would say is let's make the law fair. Let's make the law responsive and responsible to our population and our modern society and however our citizens feel about what the law should be. But leave punishment up to the judges, leave punishment up to the DAs and the defense attorneys to work out.
Well, it's interesting you put it that way, because I do think, we have griped for a long time about and bemoaned the fact that you cannot get deferred adjudication on a DWI case. And I think that really, based on what you just said, to some degree, I think if deferred adjudication was available, I don't think we'd have the pretrial diversion programs that we are seeing pop up in various counties.
No, and
so to that degree, maybe not having deferred as an option is a good thing.
Right.
Because actually the pretrial diversion is better than the deferred.
It is.
First-time offenders.
It is, but the problem is it won't be as available to access as if you had a deferred.
That's true.
I think you should have, in my personal opinion, I think you should have a regular deferred for DWIs, and I think you should have pretrial diversion for all cases, not just DWI.
I agree with you. My question is, though, would some of these very conservative prosecutors, would they say, well, we've got deferred available, so we're not going to have a pretrial diversion program for DWIs?
The prosecutors don't oppose deferred. for DWIs. That's actually not a prosecutorial roadblock.
Sure.
The real issue, I'm trying to give away too much of what goes on in the Capitol, but I mean, I think it's personally a fight with MAD.
Oh, I believe that for sure.
That they're the ones who pushed to get rid of it, because we used to allow it. But there's also a fight over interlocks.
Yes.
And there's a law. This is a big issue that's being jammed up by probably a very small log. So I would say if this is something that people care about, they should push on it. They should write and say, like, look, there should be deferred for this. But the problem is, most people don't know what it is. Most attorneys are not criminal defense or criminal attorneys, prosecutor or defense, and it's just not very much on people's radars.
Well, I think that's a lot of the other big problem we have going on. I mean, you're probably one of one in the legislature who's actually a practicing criminal
No. There's
at some point. I mean,
the House side, there are about out of 150 members, I think there's about 8 of us who have ever practiced criminal law, and there's out of that 8, about 5 of us practice it actively.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the numbers are so low.
Yeah.
I mean,
this actually brings up to a very interesting point that about the legislature is criminal law is probably the strangest area of law in the legislature because it doesn't matter who you are. Every single member carries at least one criminal justice bill.
Yeah.
And because there's always somebody in your community who comes to your door and says, I'm really upset that this happened to me. I want you to pass a bill on it.
Yeah.
And they'll say, okay.
See, that's what I mean is I think it's very easy. It's a lot easier for instance, for someone who practices exclusively criminal law to go to the legislature and understand issues like, wind insurance and flood insurance and how that affects you because you deal with it every day. Right. You deal with it as a homeowner. You deal with it, you deal with insurance as a car owner. And so I think, it's a lot easier to go to the legislature and be able to hear about what's going on with the wind and hailstorm insurance bills and everything. It's a lot easier to understand that because you live it in your own life and so you have some sort of practical application. I think it's a whole nother world, and this is the problem with some of the judges who get on the bench and have no criminal experience, is that you don't understand how the laws that you're passing actually affect the people.
And I actually spend a lot of my time in the legislature talking to members and saying, I really appreciate your bill. I think it's you have really good intent, but it's going to wreck X, Y, and Z. And it's going to really screw up stuff, and I want to help you with it, and I want to tell you how to fix it, or I'm sorry, I'm going to have to find ways to kill it because it's going to wreck the system. Or it's really, really bad for this. I know you haven't thought about it, but it's really bad for this thing.
And are they open-minded when you tell them stuff like that?
Yes. And, I've spent my career in the legislature, my short career in the legislature, sort of cultivating a reputation of being a fair dealer. That especially on criminal justice issues, on nonpartisan issues like not abortion, not union labor rights, or on criminal justice issues, I'll tell you what it is. I'll give you the honest scoop on it, and this is why it's good, this is why it's bad, this is who likes it, this is who doesn't. Is it good for your district? Maybe, maybe not. And people will actually listen to me and say, like, okay, I get your point. One of the things that I've made a point to do is try to help other members with their criminal justice bills. It's like, hey, if you actually want to watch the floor during session, or even the past sessions, you'll see the back of my head a lot of times at the front mic. So a member will be presenting their criminal justice bill, and I'll be standing facing them, but my back to the camera, sort of like whispering the answers. Because a lot of times they get asked questions like, well, how does this affect Fourth Amendment rights? I'm like, and a lot of times you can just hear my answer on the microphone, and then they just other members repeat it. That's perfectly. I'm happy to do that. And, because this stuff is hard. Search and seizure issues. I mean, most attorneys don't understand search and seizure issues. Most defense attorneys barely understand search and seizure issues.
It's true.
So when a bill comes
Well, I
up,
think they understand that the Supreme Court's gutting it. That's about the extent.
No comment.
We all for sure know that. I mean, even the Texas Supreme Court weighed in on it with regard to forfeiture law and everything. So
we've talked about marijuanas, we've talked about DWIs. Both of those affect people's ability to drive. Do you have any? You have any opinions or thoughts on dealing with people's licenses out there? I mean, you have something dealing with driver responsibility.
Yeah, so we have one bill that we're going to file for driver responsibility, and that is really dealing with people who can't pay for it.
Okay.
The driver responsibility program, for those that don't know, is if you pick up certain type of convictions, you commit certain type of offenses, the DPS will issue fines that you have to pay either every year or one time. If you don't pay those fines, in addition to the fines that you were issued in court, then you get your license suspended. And this causes a problem for a lot of people. So when I was a prosecutor, I dealt with people who were driving without insurance, maybe just for like a month, because it was a choice between buying insurance or feeding their kids. They chose feeding their kids. So they had this little gap in insurance. They got ticketed. They got stopped by the cops. The cops gave them a ticket. They couldn't deny that they didn't have insurance, so they took a conviction on it. Well, but the conviction then caused a surcharge for the driver responsibility program, and now they can't pay their surcharge because they didn't have the money in the first place. So they can either choose to not drive or not work and not take care of their kids. And most people, like they would in Houston, they chose, well, I'm going to drive.
Right.
And then they get stopped again, they pick up another surcharge, or they get arrested.
Right.
So here's the thing. People don't know this, but there already exists a program within DPS to allow you to get rid of your fines and fees through DPS, through the driver responsibility program, if you qualify. That means if you don't make enough money, the fines and fees will either be cut in half or completely gotten rid of. But nobody knows about it, or very few people know about it. And what we want to do, our bill just says, you're going to put this program and how to get into this program and how to contact this program on the letter that says how much you owe.
Oh, great call.
So, here's the thing. If somebody got busted for DWI and they picked up a conviction and they have surcharges and, they make $70,000, $80,000 a year, go pay your fines.
Go pay
your
it.
fees. Yeah, who cares? Go pay your stuff, man. Just do your stuff. But if somebody is raising 2 kids on $20,000 a year, come on, man. That's not. And here's the real problem. The driver responsibility program fines goes to emergency rooms. That's the problem. We can't cut this program out because it's $180 million that goes towards trauma and pays for the trauma centers. So where are you going to find $180 million if you get rid of this?
Kind of make it up somewhere.
Yeah.
I think the avenue of putting it in the forefront in the actual letter of suspension is brilliant. Brilliant.
We got another call coming in. Let's head over to the phone lines. Hello. Thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Hi, State Representative Gene Wu. You mentioned something earlier about just more discretion to judges and prosecutors and defense attorneys. And speaking of changing parts of the law, what do you think about, do you have any creative ideas for possibly changing or taking the baton out of the hands of prosecutors and judges when it comes to true habitual statutes or true habitual enhancements and the statutes that allow them to take someone who's had 2-year sentences in prison for drug-related crimes, and all of a sudden the person's 25 to life when they've never done more than 4 years collectively ever.
Right.
I mean, I think that you would agree, or maybe you would agree, that that's treated like a bat. The defendants and defense attorneys have to just get beat over the head with that over and over and over, and someone who's done 4 years in prison now is looking at 15 years. So is there any creative way we can get past that you have in mind? And I'll take your answer off the air. Thank you.
Thanks. So this is a really tough topic. Let me just explain. If you're watching, you don't know. If you have prior felony convictions, your next time you're busted for a felony, they can enhance you and bump you up to another level, therefore increasing your punishment. If you have 3 felony convictions and you went to the penitentiary 3 times and you commit your 4th, you're now 25 to life. And when I was a prosecutor, I had cases in front of me that someone is on their fourth charge with 3 prior pen trips, and it's for drugs, all for drugs. And literally, I have a file in front of me that says we're going to send this person for 25 years minimum for drug use. And maybe that's why I'm not at the DA's office anymore. Maybe why I didn't get promoted as fast, but that didn't feel right. That didn't seem like it was justice to send somebody to prison for 25 years for drug use.
But doesn't this go to the larger issue that's happening all across the country and at the federal level, and that's this notion of mandatory minimums,
right?
And that we should just eliminate them. I mean, you don't even have to write in a discretion and say the judge has discretion to abandon the enhancement. You just eliminate the mandatory minimum.
It's hard, and this is not a policy issue. This is a politics issue. Policy is just like, are you able to make it work? Is it a good idea? But this is about politics. This is about people getting reelected. This is about judges. Judges won't abandon because they don't want to seem like they're soft on crime because they have to get reelected.
Exactly.
And they have to survive primaries. Prosecutors, same thing. The DA's office. DA has to get elected. They're not going to say, well, we went soft on these people. So let me give you a little story. Last session, Representative Sanfronia Thompson, Miss T, she's the dean of the Democratic caucus in the House. She's the 2nd longest serving member, just an amazing woman, and worked with us on a lot of issues. And she had a bill to basically say, if you have a 4th prostitution charge, it's a felony, right? If you have 3 prior convictions and you have a 4th, it's now a felony instead of a misdemeanor. We tried to get that removed, saying like, look, misdemeanor A is a year in jail. Is that enough for prostitution? Is that enough? I think it's enough. I think it's more than enough. A year in jail isn't more than enough for prostitution.
Yeah.
And we tried to get that passed, and it was killed. And the question is, people is why? Why? What, isn't a year in jail enough for prostitution? But the thing is, again, Republicans control the House and Senate. Mm-hmm. They have to survive primaries, and they don't want to look soft. They don't want to look like, well, we're promoting prostitution.
Yeah. We got a question on Twitter I want to take real quick.
Uh-oh.
One of our viewers asks, is there any money going into mental health in the upcoming session to take the pressure off of the county jails?
Yes and no. Most of the money that's spent on county jails is from the county. Mm-hmm. The legislature has, in 2013, provided about $400 million around the state for mental health services, but that's not necessarily for criminal cases. I think it's a good idea for the state to do it. But I think it's a good idea for the state to spend money on education and on a lot of other things. But that's an uphill battle as it is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing is, I think these are all fantastic ideas. I think there's ways to let's not be tough on crime. Let's be smart on crime. And let's not, let's sit here and spin our wheels and just, are we mad at people? Are we trying to protect people? What are we trying to do?
Yeah.
So if we want to protect people, if we want to protect society, then we have to get people better. If you have people who are going to jail for mental health issues, locking them up doesn't do anything.
Doesn't solve it.
Right? If somebody has a mental illness and they keep getting arrested or they keep doing stuff, you gotta get them help. Get them off the street. We have our frequent flyers in Harris County. You go ask Vince Ryan. There's about 24 frequent flyers in Harris County that costs the county about $250,000 to $500,000 a year each. Each person costs the county about $250,000 to $500,000 each.
That's
from jail trips to ER trips, the officers having to go respond to them,
right.
Everything.
Wow.
And it's like, look, holy crap, we could literally hire 2 or 3 people to follow them around the clock, 24 hours a day, and it would still be cheaper.
Yeah, no, that's for sure.
But we don't, because we don't want to look like we're soft on crime.
That's true. We got another call coming in. Let's jump over the phone, back over the phone lines. Hello, thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Hey, it's me again.
Oh.
I'm calling back again because
You didn't get the answer you wanted the first time?
I didn't get any answer. I mean, you
I don't think
and
you're allowed to
Mr.
call
Vela,
back.
No,
Mr. Ardawan and Mr.
I'll give you the
Vela
answer.
let Mr. Wu off the hook, and that's fine. But my question is, what do we have? Are there any creative ideas for how to? Because let me back up. Representative Wu went to the fact that judges don't want to look soft on crime.
Yeah.
So guess what? That's why the legislature exists. You can take that worry out of their hands by changing the law.
Yeah.
And as far as enhancements go, that put someone as a true habitual.
And
because when that law was passed, that did not imagine someone with 2 back-to-back 2-year drug sentences in TDC. That was
I think they
3
did.
strikes rule that involved violent crimes. And because we can all agree, someone who gets 15 years on an aggravated robbery with a deadly weapon, and then 10 years on a burglary of a habitation, that's different than someone who gets 2-year back-to-back sentences on a drug case. So what I want to know is, what kind of ideas do you have, Representative Wu, without getting cut off by Mr. Vela or Mr. Ardawan, as far as
tough crowd tonight.
that option?
defense attorney.
And I'm going to stay on the line.
Okay, all right. So here's your easy answer.
We're going to cut you off.
Yeah.
I got nothing, because again, the same politics that the judges have to deal with. Guess what? Legislators have to deal with those politics as well.
Well, I think it's a simple answer. You just cut the mandatory minimum.
No, exactly.
There doesn't have to be anything creative
and
about
again,
it.
there's nothing.
You put a judge in there to be a judge, to have the discretion to sentence people.
Yeah.
And what mandatory minimums do is they take that discretion away. And it's really ridiculous at the federal system, where you've gone through the process of screening these people, putting them through Senate confirmation hearings, and then you say, well, but we're going to take away your discretion by passing mandatory minimums. And I think the same thing here, because look, regardless of whether it's straight ticket voting or not, the fact is both parties, Republican and Democrat, however they do it, they vet these people. They vet these people to be judges. So if the parties think they're qualified to be a judge, doesn't matter what you or I think, Julio, even though we have our opinion, but the fact is the Republicans and the Democrats both have vetted these people to be on their ticket and be a judge. And then what you're saying is, we don't think you're qualified to make these kind of discretionary decisions. Yeah. And that's, in the words of David Ryan, BS.
Yeah.
No, that's not what they're saying.
It is what they're saying.
And they're not mandatory minimums.
Yes, they are mandatory minimums. When you say it's 25 to life, it's a mandatory minimum.
Mandatory minimums.
That is a mandatory minimum.
If they were mandatory minimums, correct me if I'm wrong, they couldn't just
we're going to have to
through the little paragraphs.
We only have a few
No, they
minutes
don't
left.
scribble through them. If
They
it's true, if it's found to be true, they're
if the
minimums.
prosecution agrees.
No.
What I want to know is how the legislature can take that discretion away.
We're going to have to let you go because we got another call coming in I want to get to before we get off.
We got another call.
So let's jump over to the other line. Thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt. Hello.
Hey, I'd like to know if there's any move afoot within the legislature to ban or to eliminate bondsmen within the judicial system.
Yeah, that was going to be my my next topic that I wanted to get to was the bonding issue, because I know we've got a lawsuit pending here in Harris County over the bond schedule and the illegality of the bond schedule. What's being done at the legislative level?
So there is a nationwide push for bail bond reform. This is something that's been pushed by the Arnold Foundation and many other places to talk about, like, hey, let's stop locking people up and getting them to lose their jobs before they've even been convicted, especially of minor offenses. No one, I want to be very, very clear about this, no one is eliminating bondsmen. Let me say that one more time. No one is eliminating bondsmen. Please do not send bombs or hate mail.
In 4 states, they've been essentially, they're gone.
Say that again?
Yeah, 4 states don't have a bond.
Yeah, we're not. I'm saying we're not doing that in Texas.
Yeah.
No one's proposing that in Texas. What we're proposing is, what I'm proposing in the legislation I'm going to file is that we're going to ban what we call static bond ladders, meaning that if you're charged with this, then your bond is automatically this. So the example I always use is look at aggravated assault. If you put a butter knife up to somebody's throat, that's an aggravated assault. If you shoot someone in the chest and they survive, that's also an aggravated assault. Is one different from the other? Yeah, that's pretty different. But do we take that into consideration when we do somebody's bond? No. Do we? The bonds serve two purposes. One is to ensure the defendant returns to court, and two is to protect the public. So, if someone has a Class B marijuana and we throw $1,000, we throw a $500 bond on them, I was like, why? What purpose does that serve? Is that person going to run? Are they going to show up? I mean, if they have a job, they have a house, they have kids, are they going to come back to court? Yeah, most likely they're going to come back to court. So why are we holding them in jail until they can pay $500 or hire a bondsman? So we're saying get rid of a static penalty ladder. Use a evidence-based risk assessment system, meaning that your bond is set based on how much of a risk you actually are, or give them a PR bond, and and you should take into consideration all the stuff that happens. Basically, we just don't. We want the bonds to be more fair.
And what are the chances of that getting passed in this next session?
I would say it's decent. Most counties, the big counties in Texas, are already doing it. Are already starting programs like this. Harris County is doing it. I know Dallas is doing it. A lot of places, because again, when it comes down to it, this is about money. You have people sitting in jail that costs you, as the taxpayers, just a crap load of money for them to just sit in jail. You know what? If they sit in jail, they're also losing their job. They're losing their family. They're losing their house. Their kids are now going to be on welfare.
Right.
Right? You're paying for all that. Why? Get them out. Put them on a PR bond. Reduce their bond. Get them out. Put them back to work. Make them earn money, and make them hire a lawyer instead of the county providing them one.
Yeah, we're almost out of time.
We are.
But thanks for the great call.
There's lots of stuff.
There's so much stuff we could talk with you about, Gene.
There was one. We didn't get to one of the main things that I really wanted to hit on you, but at the same time,
30 seconds.
Yeah, I know.
You hurry.
Last word. Go ahead. What do you?
Look, here, there is here's my most important bill that I'm going to file next session. This is our top priority. We're raising the juvenile jurisdiction age to 18. Texas, 2 years ago, was one of only 9 states left in the nation that had not done this. We're now one of 7 states. By next spring, we will be one of 6 states left that has not done this. This has to be done. It's an issue of justice. It's an issue of fairness. We want kids to be able to make mistakes. And I'm telling you, 17-year-olds are kids. They're idiots. Let them make mistakes and without destroying their entire life.
And on that, that's the last word of the evening, ladies and gentlemen. Gene Wu, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. Julio, we will be back next week, everybody. Good night. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next Thursday night for Julio Vela, Gene Wu. I'm Jimmy Ardwan. Good night.
Peace.